welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship. Hey everybody, we are so happy that you are tuned in listening to Love How Deep podcast. Brian and I are trying to recover from our weekend. We briefly went out of town, visited some family, and we did have a really nice time, but the return flight home was delayed.
Oh, my word. Yeah, we were supposed to get home at, 11 p.m. on Sunday night, which was late enough as it was because we wanted to go to work the next morning.
Right.
But 11 p.m., came and went, right?
It came, it went.
And,
we had
and
airplane
12 o'clock
issues.
came and went.
12, 1, 2. When did we land? 3?
I think our flight took off at 2 in the morning.
Oh, my gosh.
And we landed at 3, and then we drove home from there 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? 3:30?
Yeah, we got home at 3:30.
Got in bed at 3:30, probably asleep 5 minutes after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even bother to put on pajamas, y'all. I was just too exhausted.
Yes.
It was straight to bed in my clothes, did not care. So we are semi-recovered from that.
That's right.
And ready to jump back into what we do here in Midlothian.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we are going to be talking about, since we saw family, this is probably a good segue into what our episode is. And we're calling it Setting Healthy Boundaries with Parents. And so I think no matter what stage of your marriage you're in, this should be helpful to you. I mean, maybe newlyweds more so, but I think really at any stage, right?
Right. I think it's important to set these boundaries when you are newlyweds. But, if you're married 20 years or whatever, you still might have some boundary issues, and it's not too late to try to set these boundaries and, kind of change the course of the ship, I guess.
Right.
So hopefully this will, really speak to you no matter what age and stage you are in your marriage. And if you're parents and you've got children that are married, hey, don't tune us out because we will be speaking with you too a little bit too. As hard as it is to let our kids go.
That's true.
We do have to let them go and let them lead their own lives as adults.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I guess we've been on both ends of that.
Yes, we have.
We've been on the end of breaking free. That's probably not the right thing to say, but
being newlyweds.
Right. Creating our own family.
Yes.
But then we've also had a daughter who has moved on and gotten married. So we've been on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So boundaries are very important. They're very important really in life in general, with, all of our relationships. But again, we're focusing on boundaries with parents, in today's episode. And so what is a boundary, you might be asking yourself? Well, I'm going to tell you. Thanks for asking. A boundary is really just a personal limit or a guideline that defines what you are okay with happening and what's acceptable to you with how others behave towards you or interact with you. It's kind of an invisible line that separates you from other people. I mean, I think, would you say that's an accurate way to describe what a boundary is?
I think so. And it's not an invisible line or invisible fence that's to keep you away from them. It's just so that you can, what am I trying to say? So that you can, leave your mother and father and come together with your spouse, creating your own family. And you want to create your own habits, your own traditions, and make your own decisions and things like that. And sometimes it's just hard for everybody to kind of let go. So we do have to have these boundaries, these invisible rules or lines.
That's right.
Between us, but not in a bad way.
Exactly. Boundaries are really all about love. It's like the reason that you set them sometimes is because I love you, and I want to make sure that our relationship continues in a healthy manner. And if we don't have these boundaries, sometimes they are not healthy. And then relationships can sometimes end because of that. So look at it that way. So we are first going to be talking about why boundaries are important in general. And there's lots of reasons. We're going to focus on 3 reasons why boundaries are crucial in any relationship, but again, specifically with the couple. But the first one is maintaining individual identity, or really with parents, it's maintaining your couple's identity. And that's really what this is all about. When you get married and you start your own family, there's going to be a lot of things that maybe you will carry on from your family of origin, but there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be new and different than what you grew up with. And so by installing these healthy boundaries, it helps you maintain this identity as a couple. The scripture, I think, that goes along with this that I really love, it's in Galatians chapter 6, verse 4. It says, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. So again, this is all about your own individual identity and creating something that's special to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that parents can't come in and give some influence, but ultimately you're the decision maker here. So that's number one, why boundaries are important. Do you have a second one?
Yeah, another point to this is just to preserve your emotional well-being as a couple and also as an individual, because sometimes if we just feel pulled in so many different directions, maybe you're a people pleaser, and so mom wants you to come visit her, but maybe your spouse's parents want you to go visit them. Like, think about the holidays and you've got to go make the rounds. How fun and exciting is that holiday when you've got to go to 4 different homes and things like that? And it can make you feel so stressed and so overwhelmed and just absolutely exhausted. And a lot of times when we feel emotionally exhausted and overwhelmed, we start nitpicking at each other and unintentionally. And so I think that it just causes so much discord between you and your spouse because you're trying to please everyone else and do whatever everyone else wants to make them happy. In Philippians 4:7, it says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. So I want you to think about like how these boundaries, if you say, okay, no, I have to say no to this person, and it's okay. God can give you a peace about that, and it can help keep some peace between you and your spouse. And if you have to say no to someone, say, no, not now, but later. That's okay to do that. But understand your own limitations and preserve your own emotional well-being by practicing some of these things that we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And then the final reason why boundaries are very important, just again, in general, it fosters mutual respect. And you might think that's strange. Again, sometimes it feels like when you're setting a boundary, oh, I'm respecting myself, but I'm not really respecting the other person. No, actually you are. I'm thinking about, even though we're not specifically jumping to parents just yet, I've heard other people say that when they've made a career choice that maybe the parent didn't agree with, like let's say the parents have a business or something and they want the kids to follow in the footsteps and they just decide they're not going to, and they move on to something else, there might be this feeling like, oh, I'm not respecting you as my parent. But in reality, the parent is really who helped mold and shape you, and maybe jumping off into a different direction is a sign of, hey, you learned independence from me, even though you're not taking on the family business like I wanted you to. You're learning independence just like I learned it, when I created the business that I run or whatever, for example. So again, it is all about mutual respect, even though I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way. 1 Peter 2:7 says, show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the emperor. And it is all about respect. And with that, we are going to talk a little bit more about now jumping into a little bit more specifics about parents.
Right. Yeah. So just like you said, Brian, why are boundaries important was that first part. So why is it important to set these with your parents? Which I guess I did kind of touch on that just a little bit when I was talking earlier. But by setting boundaries with your I can't talk today. By setting boundaries with your parents, you are prioritizing your relationship with your spouse. So you're reinforcing that your marriage is more important than any other relationship. And it's okay to do that because in Genesis 2:24, it says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And I think that that goes both ways. I know that it says a man leaves his father and his mother and holds to his wife. Well, something to keep in mind, women, is that you also are leaving your father and mother and you are holding fast to your husband because you are one flesh. And so that's, something important to remember here, that you're putting your marriage relationship above all other relationships that you have, whether it's friends or siblings or your parents, really. So, yeah, you've got to prioritize each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And a second reason, I think this really fits with number one as well, is that you're establishing your independence, which I think, Absolutely. Heather, is exactly really what you're saying. Because it's all about taking that next step in life and moving out on your own and doing things on your own. And, really, I don't know what else can be said about that, but
yeah,
you're prioritizing your spouse and you're establishing your independence together.
Right.
I love Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. So what that's really saying is, I'm putting God as my focus. I'm sort of turning my attention away from my parents, and I'm looking more at the Lord for guidance and direction. It doesn't mean that you're completely, permanently turning away from your parents. It just means, no, the Lord is who is going to be my focus. And yes, my parents have wisdom and they have great things to offer and great things to say. So yes, I will return back to them often and I will honor and respect them. But at the same time, my focus is now on the Lord, and for me individually and us as a couple. So that's why boundaries with parents are very important. And so that sets the stage for us to talk a little bit more about common areas that parents can overstep. So we can talk about these boundaries all we want, implement them, put them into practice, but there's several areas where they seem to step over. And so we're going to talk about 5 common areas that this happens. Now, you that are listening, you might have some other areas, but more than likely it's pretty common that these are happening potentially for you. And number 1 is in financial matters. So involvement in financial decisions or providing unsolicited financial advice. And really, I wouldn't necessarily say you have to put up a boundary and say, don't ever give me financial advice, but just know that, you can make your own decision. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. I mean,
right. Right. Sometimes we do need to seek some other counsel or something like that, or bounce some ideas off someone. But I think the important thing here, especially if you are parents, it's important to maybe sometimes keep your opinions to yourself and give advice only when asked, especially on financial matters and really any major decisions that have to happen with your children.
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes that one can be hard because if you come from a family with some wealth, then maybe there's been situations where your parents have given you money, and then there's sort of this unspoken sort of pressure or strings attached to this money that I know that's a little bit uncomfortable. It's difficult to dance around, and you obviously have to make your own decision with that. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't let money from your parents be something that would pressure you into making decisions that you don't agree with. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe it does mean that you have to walk away from more money that comes in from your parents because of that. But again, just a decision that you have to make. So that is one common area. Do you have another one?
Yeah. Parenting advice. I mean, as parents, we absolutely want to give advice to our children because we have been there, done that. I got the t-shirt to prove it. I mean, because we're older, we're more mature, we've made mistakes, and we don't want to see our kids fall into those same traps. And that can be so hard to let them go through the school of hard knocks, let them live and learn, let them fall and get up and dust themselves off and, and get things right, So as hard as it is, parents, we've got to watch that. We've got to let them live their own lives, and rely on this verse, Proverbs 22:6, that says, start children off on the way they should go. And even when they are old, they will not turn from it. And let me tell you, it may look like right now your kids are not going the way that you've trained them, the way that God would want them to go. But you know what? All you can do is pray for them. That's what we say to our couples that we work with, that if one spouse is kind of running from God and one is running to God, what do we say to that one that's running to God? All you can do is pray for them. That is the best thing that you can do, is pray for them. That's the best thing that you can do for your kids, is pray for them. And, you know, I think sometimes keeping our opinions and our unsolicited parenting advice to ourselves can be a really good thing. I think I said it before, give that advice when asked. I think that's such an important thing to remember.
That's right.
You know, and I think I want to say this too, kids, young people that are married and trying to set these boundaries, if you feel like you're hearing more advice than you really want, it's okay to say that you don't need the advice right now. It's okay to say that. It's okay to just say, I appreciate it, but you know, that's not what I'm looking for in this situation. It's okay.
Right. And I would say, as a parent, if you really want to give advice, then you can ask, hey, would you like some advice, or would you like some input? And if your son or daughter says, you know what, I've got it, I'm good. Okay, no problem. But I'm here if you need me for anything.
Yeah.
I think you can do something like that.
Yeah. I do think all of that comes from a place of love, but we've got to let our kids just be adults, you know, got to let the bird fly out of the nest.
That's right. Yep, exactly. Another way that parents can sometimes overstep their bounds is in their kids' time management. So, you know, it could be specifically about judging how they spend their time with, you know, friends or other things in their lives, or it could be how they spend time with themselves, the parents, which is going to overlap, I think, a little bit in this next one we're going to talk about. But, you know, like if you hear your parents, you know, putting down some judgment about, you know, I think you're involved in too many activities, extracurricular activities and hobbies and things like that, you know, and you should be spending more time with each other and the kids. And yes, maybe that is true. But again, that's not really their place. That's for you to figure out as a couple. And again, if you're sensing that maybe you're out of balance and you need some wisdom and some guidance from someone older, then yes, go to your parents and ask about that. But that is an overstep. Again, talking about time management. Right. Psalm 90:12 says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And I think really what that's saying is we all are sort of in charge of our own number of days here on earth, even though we don't know how many of those are, only God knows. But still, we are in charge of how we spend them, what we do with them, how we steward them. And when we arrive on the doorstep of heaven, we will hear from God, you know, and hopefully he tells us, well done, thy good and faithful servant, meaning you did much with what I gave you. And that's really the point. But again, that's for all of us to have that conversation with the Lord when the time comes. So that is another way parents overstep. You got another one that I think I overstepped on yours just a little bit.
You didn't. They kind of go together. And that would be personal space, where, you know, maybe your parents come over all the time to your house, and maybe they have a key. Maybe they just walk on in or whatever. And, or maybe they expect you over at their house for every Sunday dinner, but perhaps you don't want to do that one week. And that's okay. I think it takes communication. Just like, you know, we talk big about communicating with your spouse. You've got to be able to communicate with parents in the situation, you know, in your family, like, hey, you know, not this time, not this week, you know, and, with parents respecting that it is your home that you're making together, and vice versa. You know, maybe you need to turn in your house key because you've gotten married and you don't need to have this right to walk in the door of their home anytime you want to. I think that is something that is just, it's conversation between you and all of the parents of what that boundary would kind of look like, just to respect each other's personal space.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, a real quick story on that. When I was married the first time, my in-laws and my wife were very close, and there were situations that came up where they just kind of came over unannounced, knocked at the door, and came on in, and it happened a lot. And unfortunately, I didn't handle it very well, and got very upset with it at some point, and caused kind of a disruption in the relationship for a while. And so, looking back on that, obviously a boundary needed to be set in place, but I didn't do it appropriately. So looking back on that, obviously could have handled that in a different way. So that's something to also think about, is how you handle putting the boundaries in place. You can't just say something like, I'm putting a boundary in place and here it is, and I'm drawing a line. And, you don't want to be that way about it. You want to be respectful, obviously, like we talked about earlier. The last way that parents can overstep, and again, there may be more, but we've just got 5 today, in your decision making, your attempts to make major life decisions, like whether it be, again, taking a new job or purchasing a new home or a new car. I mean, there may be times that your parents don't agree with what you're doing, but again, that's your decision to make. And again, asking for advice is one thing, but ultimately taking that advice, thanking them for it, and saying, I'm going to make my own decision, is really just important for you to continue to do. And maybe there are times where you do take their advice and you do make those decisions that they are asking you to make, but a lot of times maybe not. So, scripture that I love for this one, James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So once again, kind of like I said earlier, you're looking to God for your wisdom, not that you're never looking at your parents for wisdom. He put them there for a reason, but you're mostly looking to God. So the two of you as a couple might want to pray about a big decision, about purchasing a home or a new vehicle or taking a job or moving to another state. Really pray to God about that, because you're going to get, and not just parents, but you're going to get judgments from everybody. If you go around and ask friends and other family members and colleagues, everybody's going to have a different opinion, right?
That's a lot of excess opinion and
Right.
advice.
Right.
Opinions masked as advice, really, that
Right.
that can weigh on you heavily, because you're like, well, I don't know, this person said this person said that. And I don't know, Brian and I have really found that keeping some of these decisions to ourselves, between us and God, and really waiting until we hear from God, it goes a lot better. And then we can, once we feel a little bit more comfortable about the direction God is leading, it's like, then we feel that sort of release to share that. And it's like, hey, this is the decision that we're making. And that's it. Like, it's not up for discussion. And we don't obviously say it like that, like, this is our decision and we're not discussing it. But that's kind of the stance that we sort of take on it as a united front with each other towards other people's opinions, I guess, about what we're saying. And I'm rambling.
You're correct. Hey,
I'm spiraling. I don't know.
Well, we're going to jump then. So we're going to just take a leap
Let's jump
to
the
next
practical
section.
Practical tips. How do I do this? How do I set boundaries with parents? And, so we've got like 5 practical tips. And the first one is just open communication. I've already said communication. I've said that word multiple times tonight, but it does come down to that. It is. Proverbs 16:24 says, gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. So if you need to speak the truth in love, make sure that you speak the truth in love, because that is what Jesus calls us to do. And so, discuss with your spouse, how do you want to handle this situation? How, and maybe brainstorm with each other good ways of presenting it. And even some of those, well, what if this is their response, or what if that? Like, just be prepared and be a united front and openly communicate the things that are important to you as a couple.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. And just, it's okay to say to your parents, like if they're criticizing your job choice or whatever, they can say it once, but, if they keep saying it, you might need to say, you know what, I love you. and I understand where you're coming from, but this is not helpful anymore. I've made my decision, and I just want you to be happy for me. I mean, you hear what I'm saying. You're kind of couching it with a lot of love,
Right.
the way you're speaking to them.
Right.
So, another practical tip on setting boundaries with parents is to present a united front. And if we haven't said that already, I think hopefully that's been made pretty clear. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, this is all about communication with each other. So talking about things. Right. And sometimes I know Heather and I, you can't catch everything, but sometimes when we're getting ready to interact with somebody, whether it be parents or someone else, we might anticipate, hey, I know this is a big subject that's kind of in the air right now. How should we handle this if this comes up? What would you do? Okay, here's what I might do. Okay, great. We're in agreement, or no, we're not. All right, let's talk about it some more. Right? I mean,
yeah, it's called a preemptive strike.
Right.
And it's really good. It's really good. It just helps you process through your thoughts and anything that you're coming to an agreement with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And for this one, Ecclesiastes 4:9 is very appropriate. It says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. And I don't know why I just thought of this. Maybe I'm hungry, but I love Oreo cookies. So we have the white cream and the dark cookie, or Fig Newtons. We have the outside layer and the fig in the middle. 2 is better than 1. Okay. And
all
with
right,
that,
and
let's hurry up because I'm hungry.
On. And I will feed you a Fig Newton and an Oreo.
Okay.
Number 3, be clear and specific. Clearly articulate the boundaries so that you can avoid misunderstanding of what it is that you're trying to say. Stick to the topic. Don't, jump all over the place with all of these different topics. Decide on the one thing that you want to discuss with your parents and stick to that. And just like with each other, you don't want to dredge up like old arguments or old fights or old things that have happened. You don't want to do that with each other. Don't do that with your parents either. Yeah. And just, so clear and specific with what you're looking for, what you're looking to accomplish with that specific boundary.
That's a good one. All right.
And what do you think? You got number 4?
Yeah, number 4 is enforce consequences if necessary. That's the keywords, if necessary. So there may be that you do need to establish some consequences for crossing boundaries. I like to say that you don't necessarily need to have consequences for every boundary. Like every time you make up or decide on what a boundary might be, again, you don't necessarily have to have a consequence. Maybe it's not a consequence that needs to happen until the boundary is crossed like several times. Like, I wouldn't go to your parents and say, all right, here's the way this is going to work. You're only going to come over on Wednesdays at 6 p.m., no other times. And, if you show up on Thursday at 6 p.m., that means that Wednesday nights are now off the table. No, that maybe is not something that you necessarily need to do. But again, if you say Wednesdays at 6, and then for the next 7 days in a row, they come knocking on your door at 6 o'clock every single night. Well, then it may be the 6th or 7th time something needs to happen there. I don't know. But, and then even I think communicating consequences, sometimes you don't even need to worry about that. Like maybe you have a boundary that you want to put into place, and in your mind, you're thinking, you know what, if this boundary's crossed, here's what's going to happen. Again, give grace, I would say, as much as you can with the boundaries. But I know we all have our breaking point or kind of the end of our rope. And I think this probably verse really helps me. Proverbs 19:19. It says, a hot-tempered person must pay the penalty. Rescue them and you will have to do it again. So again, don't be hot-tempered. Don't be just spouting off consequences here, there, and everywhere. Just be gracious, be merciful when you establish these boundaries. And I think that plays into number 5.
Yeah.
Right. So this
number
is
5. Yeah. Reassure with love. Reassure with love that communicate that love and appreciation for your parents while you're asserting the need for these boundaries. It's okay to do that. Like you need to be, as a couple, you need to be okay to have that conversation, and it's a hard conversation with your parents, but tell them that you love them and that you're doing this because you love them, and you know that they love you and they want to see you as a married couple flourish. And tell them that it's okay if we fall on our face. Let us live and learn. I think it's okay. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, do everything in love. I mean, that right there says it. So,
right.
yeah.
We should do everything in love. Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
absolutely.
I mean, not just this, but everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really what,
go ahead.
I was going to say, that's what Love How Deep is all about. It's about love.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
And then, there are some challenges with setting boundaries with parents. And so that's what we want to talk about now, what some of those challenges might be.
Right. So we've got 5 challenges. The first one is really something that's internal to ourselves, is that we sometimes feel like there's a guilt, or maybe we have an obligation to not set a boundary. And it's okay if you feel this way. When you first start to do these types of things, you're going to feel this, and you're probably even going to feel it even before you do anything. I know I've felt it before. I mean, and you feel it because you care about people, and the initial thought is like, oh, I'm doing this and this is wrong and this is going to be upsetting. And yes, it probably will be upsetting to someone, but to know that, again, I go back to saying that boundaries are all about love. We're implementing this boundary because we want to continue this relationship. So it is done from a place of love, but you might feel some guilt, and that's okay. But I think that will get better at time. The verse that I love with this one, it's Galatians 1:10. It says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. So yeah, again, doesn't mean we're not supposed to love people. We are, but again, think about pleasing God over people. You got a second common challenge with setting boundaries with parents?
Yes. So another challenge is just parental resistance. Your parents may resist or challenge the boundaries that you've set. They may not want to have that conversation with you. It's not easy. It really isn't. And we totally get that. We respect that, and understand it. And I just want to, let the parents know, like, we understand in the Bible, it says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy a long life on the earth. So when the children have left and married one another and started their own family, understand that they can show honor to you, but that doesn't mean that they obey, I guess, and do everything that you're saying that they should do. They do need to make their own decisions. And so, young people, married people, remember to show honor to your parents, especially when you are having these tough conversations and setting these boundaries. You do want to honor them. You do want to respect them. I mean, they have raised you, and let's just say they've probably done a good job. Give them that credit, So just be respectful during this time, and know going into it that there may be some resistance. Just kind of expect that. Pray about that. Yeah.
That's right. And along with that resistance, there may be cultural or family history expectations that are placed upon you by your parents. And I've seen this a lot in the couples that we've mentored, especially when you have a couple of mixed cultural upbringing, so to speak. Like maybe somebody was raised here in the United States and maybe their spouse was more raised in, I don't know, a Latin American country or South America or Europe or something like that. And what we've come to discover is that in other parts of the world, there is more of a tight-knit kind of close family situation. And here in America, a lot of times it is more of like an independent kind of do your own thing type of situation. And so that can cause a lot of friction and some sparks to fly. And like I said, we've seen this in relationships with couples where especially the premarital couples have gotten married and then they go into their marriage and now all of a sudden one says, oh, I want to have family dinners with my family 4 nights a week. And the other person is like, wait a second, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So, so there could be that, and you could be getting pressure from your parents because of that. But again, that goes back to communicate with each other, try to come up with some kind of a compromise. there if you can. Maybe there's a good meeting in the middle with that one. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think another important thing to remember is consistency. There can be a struggle with that, with, not following through on things that you set a boundary for. So you want to maintain consistency, enforce the boundaries. And in James 5:12, it says, above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. So just let your yes be yes and your no be no, and stick to that. Be consistent with the boundaries that you've agreed to as a couple, and with what you've shared with your parents as to what those boundaries are.
Yeah, and funny little quick story about this doesn't have anything to do with parents, but one day I had asked a couple at church, I said, hey, I think you all would be great. I was talking to, I think, the female. I said, you all would be great marriage mentors. Would you like to join the team and help married couples? And the female just looked at me and said, no.
No.
And then there was like a long kind of a pause and a stare.
Yeah.
And it was majorly awkward.
Yeah.
And then I found myself just, okay, well, no problem. It's okay. It's all right. Not a big deal. And again, I think this says, let your yes be yes, your no be no. And yes, that's all you need to say. But man, was that awkward.
It was, but she knew what her personal boundaries were.
That's right.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The last one that we want to talk about in this section, common challenges, are communication breakdowns, misunderstandings, or breakdown in communications with parents. I think the big one here that I'll mention in today's day and age is in texting. I've had several instances with not only parents, but everyone, where there's been a text sent and there's been a misunderstanding. And
haven't we all?
Yeah, for sure. Again, you can't see tone. Sometimes it's just so quick.
Language.
Yeah, there's no body language.
Facial expression.
Right. Sometimes there's like the words are auto corrected to something different.
Whoops.
I mean, it can happen. So again, be careful with texting, but just in general, be patient and slow when you're communicating, because there can be misunderstandings.
Right.
And that speaks to Proverbs 15:1 that says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So just be gentle, be calm, be loving in your communication.
I think all of that is good. And just to kind of, wrap these things up that we've been talking about, setting boundaries is never easy. We totally understand that. But it will get better over time. And so, just hopefully you've written some of these things down, or you can go back through the show notes and get some of these points or listen to it again. But, work on this together as a couple. And then, another thing I want to say is just to be supportive with each other as you work to set the boundaries, because it is not easy. And so if you can support each other, there's a little bit more strength and power in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. Those are good. And I think with that, we're going to wrap. Although, if you are wanting something to help you with communication, because that's what boundaries is all about, it's about communication, we have a guide called the 10 Practical Communication Strategies. And again, if you need help communicating boundaries, you can start with this free guide that will help the two of you have more effective and connecting conversations with each other. And I think the more that you do that, the easier it will be to communicate with your parents. And so having these difficult conversations around boundaries, again, not easy, but this can help you. So make sure that you click on that link. It'll be in the show notes, and you can receive that immediately. It's a PDF, and then you will also be signed up to get our newsletter to stay more connected with us and learn some valuable things about staying connected with each other. And I think that is a wrap, right?
I think so.
Right. Do we have any cookies? That's what I was asking about earlier. I don't think we do.
Fig Newtons. No, we don't have cookies in this house.
Okay. Well, I think it's a little late to be out to the grocery store, but Maybe
go
tomorrow.
Get a peanut.
Oh, okay.
No, cashews.
Just one?
That's what we have. Yeah, you can have a
Okay.
cashew.
Oh.
Okay. They don't want to know what you're going to snack.
No, they don't. All right. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.